Hi everyone, I'm Gerald. I'm a licensed engineer here in the Philippines, and I'm currently a student at UIUC in their Masters of Business Administration program. In the past, I've read hundreds of personal finance and self development books, and I've attended several career and investing seminars and workshops. And during this time, I've applied everything I learned and knew what works and what doesn't work when it comes to adulting. In this video, I will tell you my top 3 tips for people who are in their 20s. Tip number 1 is be a sponge. A lot of mistakes that I see new hires make is thinking too high of themselves. So, it's important that you have an apprentice mindset and maintain that apprentice to master relationship with your immediate supervisor. You can offer solutions to broken processes while you're working on the job. You can suggest ideas to your immediate supervisor, and you must be assertive during meetings, but don't overcompensate by being too aggressive, but don't be too passive either. So the trick is to be open-minded, be more observant, and be more absorbent with the inputs that your colleagues make and the inputs that your immediate supervisor makes, and be humble as well. So don't be too high of yourself, but you, even though you, let's say you are an honor student in college and you know a lot of stuff, don't be too braggy about it, and always show that you're willing to learn the subject matter, and you show that you want to improve your skill set, you want to improve your competency in order to do your job better. Tip number 2 is know when to move. So there are two signs that for me is important to recognize when you're working on the job and knowing when to move from one company to another. First is if you see a toxic work culture. There were a couple of instances that I see on social media where people want to leave or resign, but then again, after 5 years, they're still in the same company, doing the same type of job, doing the same type of paperwork. And if you stay in a job that is too toxic for you, it will slowly eat your mental health without you recognizing it. So, my tip is don't leave immediately, but instead leave when you have a job offer at a different company and you have signed a contract in that same company. Why? Because if you leave your current company and you start to find a different job where you want to move into, you don't have that leverage when it comes to salary negotiations if you don't have a company that you're working on currently. Sign number 2 is if you feel too comfortable. So I always see this quote appearing from time to time in my news feed that life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And that's true because if you strive to learn more things and you strive to have more responsibilities when it comes to work and your personal matters, that is how you grow personally and professionally. So, if you recognize those two signs where you have a toxic work culture and you feel too comfortable with the work that you're doing, my 3 concrete steps for you to take is to first devote time before or after work to learn a new skill or to improve your own skill set. Number 2 is to update your resume. 3 is to apply to as many jobs as possible before you go to sleep or on your way to work. It's easy with this modern technology where you can save your resume to your phone and just browse through job postings over the internet and just apply to whichever position that you think you're capable of doing, or jobs that excite you and jobs that you want to move into. Tip number 3 is to take time to figure out and understand your values. So, I've read this book called Good to Great by Jim Collins before, And there are three things or three takeaways that I've learned from that particular book. That is the hedgehog concept. So the hedgehog concept is a principle that companies should identify where their core value proposition is, or the primary thing that they do very, very well, and focus on that. So the concept says that the companies where they scatter interests from one objective to another, for example, Apple, you don't imagine Apple creating a bag, right? Because Apple focuses on consumer tech, right? So if, for example, Apple strays from what they usually make, then that would sort of derail their image as a consumer technology company. In layman's terms, if you want to understand what your values are and the things that you want to do in the future, take time to understand and be brutally honest to yourself by answering these three questions. What are these three questions? First is, what are you deeply passionate about? What is that thing where you can do it over and over again every single day, every hour of every minute of every day, even if you don't get paid? That's one thing to look at it. Or one thing that you have made in the past, you have made since you were a kid, and you haven't realized that time has passed and you have just been immersed to what you're doing, and you just enjoyed it without any other distractions. So let's say you want drawing, or you want painting, or you want counting money. Get a pen and paper and just write down all of the things that you are deeply passionate about. Question number two is, what can you be the best in the world at? These are things that you remember your teacher telling you when you were a kid that you are very good at this, and some other teachers also commend you about doing very well at this particular skill. So I believe that every person, when they're born, are capable of doing or mastering a specific skill set faster than other people. So we are all unique, right? And there are people who are really good at math, or are very natural at counting numbers, and there are people who are weak at arithmetic but are really good at painting or sketching or architecting houses, right? So you have to find out what can you be the best in the world at, and what is your unfair advantage compared to other people. So be brutally honest to yourself and write down the skills that you think you can be the best in the world at. Number three is, what drives your economic engine? So this hedgehog concept was made only for companies, but it can also apply to people, from being good to great, right? What drives your economic engine for me becomes, what is that thing that you're deeply passionate about, and that thing that you can be the best in the world at supply you with your monetary needs. So you have to also consider if this thing could provide you the monetary needs that you need in the future to be able to support yourself or your family, right? Let's say you are deeply passionate in singing, and you can be the best in the world at singing, right? If this singing talent of yours can support you monetarily in the future, then that's okay. Then you can proceed with honing that particular skill and focusing on that skill at this point up to the time where you become famous, for example, in the future. Also, another example, if you're really good at painting, you're deeply passionate about painting, and you can be the best in the world at painting. You think that there's no one other than you can be great at painting what you do best, right? If this painting can support you in the future, and you think that you can live in the future just by painting or doing some side hustle stuff that is related to painting, then feel free to improve on that particular skill and just devoting and passionately doing paintings where you can hone that particular skill set. So again, what are you deeply passionate about? What can you be the best in the world at? And can this drive your economic engine? So be brutally honest about yourself and make sure that you are reminiscing all of the things that happened to you since you were a kid. That is the trick of recognizing what your life's purpose is, right? If you also read Mastery by Robert Greene, he said that sometimes the things that we are born for happened since we were a kid. So some of our really famous scientists and painters just happened to be working on something that inspired them that when they were a kid. Like for example, there's a scientist that he mentioned in the book where he's a famous scientist, and that is because when he was a kid he encountered this particular laboratory equipment that he worked on for the specific amount of time, and that's when he later discovered this particular element. So my tip is to try to remember the things that you were really good at since you were a kid, and specifically when you were a kid. Most of the time those are the times when you can see where you're really good at. So to summarize my top 3 tips: be a sponge. So don't think too high of yourself, but instead have a learning mindset. Number 2 is know when to move from one company to another. And 2 signs for that is if you have a toxic work culture and if you feel too comfortable with the type of work that you're doing. And lastly, take time to figure out and understand your values. So the hedgehog concept would work, and also the things that you've been enjoying doing since you were a kid could be a hint for you about what you can be really good at and what you can be really passionate about. So if you have any recommendations about what should I talk about next, just feel free to comment it down below, and subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to notify you as soon as I upload a new video.